Hello, everybody. Welcome back to creative writing class. It's been a while. Try to keep my focus as best I can on the camera. I'm very excited to get back to it with y'all. I hope you all have been doing well, have been enjoying your summers, and also have been staying safe and maintaining the distance that we all need. So today, I wanted to just outline where we are going to head with creative writing classes in the future. So I'm going to be submitting a class on Wednesday and on Tuesday. Or sorry, oh man, I'm going to be submitting Wednesday and Thursday. Excuse me. So Thursdays and Wednesdays at let's shoot for 1 o'clock. Okay. That is when I'm going to be going live. If you would care to join me during the live stream here on YouTube. So I believe on Wednesdays I'm going to explore poetry and fiction. Okay. And on Thursdays, I'm going to explore more free form and very, very open rules of writing. I'm going to call it journaling for right now. But really on Thursdays, I'm going to focus more on reflecting on yourself and writing about yourself. On Wednesdays, I'm going to focus on stuff that we can make up. And obviously, anything about yourself is going to work its way into your writing. That is just a part of the writing game. So today, I'm going to start with a short piece of fiction that I wrote for you all. And then next Wednesday, we'll do some poetry. And then on Thursdays, we'll do more introspection, meaning looking at yourself with your writing, which I think should be good. You guys will get to know a lot more about me, which should be a little exciting, I guess. But I just wanted to let y'all know exactly where we are headed in this uncertain future. So to the best of my knowledge, that is the brief overview of where creative writing is headed. For the time being, we are going to refocus our efforts away from theater and acting right now, just because it's very difficult to do in these times. So without further ado, let me share with you how I came up with my piece of short fiction today. Today, I used what is called a random dialogue generator. Okay, you can look this up on Google for your own purposes. If you don't care for the particular line of dialogue that was randomly given to me that I wrote about today, feel free to look up online random dialogue generator, and you will find many, many options, many different websites that most of them should be free, or if they're asking you for any money, find a free one, okay? But today's piece of dialogue, so dialogue is something that is spoken. Dialogue is something that is typically shared between two people. Dia meaning two, and log meaning speech. Okay, so it is speech that is shared between two people. And you guys should be familiar with the term monologue. That is when a person is talking all by themselves. So I chose a random piece of dialogue, and our piece of dialogue is, I never meant to come between you and him. Okay, so that is our random piece of dialogue. Sorry, I keep forgetting where to look. I look at myself, which is odd because it looks like I'm looking down. So I'll try to keep my eyes up so that it might seem like we're actually speaking to each other, or I'm at least speaking to you. I will say that again for those of you who would like to write it down. So our first line of our short piece of fiction today can be this line. And if you don't particularly feel inspired by this line, feel free to search up your own first bit of dialogue to start your short story with. But the one I selected today is, I never meant to come between you and him. I selected this because there was a couple in the generator, and I clicked it a couple of times until I got something that was thought-provoking for me. And that's always a good place to start for those of you who are going to take a shot at this on your own and finding your own dialogue to start your short fiction. But I just thought that there was some interesting possibilities here. I never meant to come between you and him. Immediately made me wonder, who is speaking? Who are they speaking to? And why did things get this way? It seems like a serious topic. And I like serious topics. So I was ready to go after it today. And I was very surprised at what I ended up writing. And that's something you all should leave room for. When you are writing, it is important to have an idea about which you're going to start writing, but it is also very important to remain open to whatever flies into your head while you are constructing your pieces of fiction. Okay? So I didn't really anticipate where this story was going to go. And I'm pleased that it kind of found a life of its own. The more I started writing, the more I realized, okay, I'm starting to really get into these two characters. So before I read my piece of short fiction for you all, let's review for a moment. Feel free to find your own piece of dialogue if you would like, if this one isn't particularly inspiring for you. Feel free to not have your short story figured out before you start writing. Feel free to find it on the page, if you will, okay? Because you might discover that you write one line and then all of a sudden the story changes for you, the author of this piece. And I think it's important to sort of follow those instincts, if you will. We've all done a lot of writing together over the years. So this should be more review than it is a whole new idea. That's what being creative is all about. It's about starting somewhere with a good idea and then allowing it to take a different shape as you are constructing it, as you are creating it. It, in some ways, reminds me of improvisation. You get something juicy to start with, and then who knows where the scene goes, and who knows where your stories may lead you. So anyway, I am going to read you guys my short piece of fiction. It does not have a title. I find that working from titles often boxes me in. And I don't leave myself open for those moments of inspiration. So myself, I always title my work after I'm done writing them. And I would classify most of the pieces that I share with you guys as incomplete myself. I get started on an idea, and then really in order to complete these short stories or short pieces of fiction, I need to go back and I need to rewrite some things, and I need to add more things to really come up with a beginning, a middle, and an end. That should also ring very familiar for many of you. Okay, so I think I've talked about the process enough. And now I am going to read you guys my short piece of fiction. And let's just refer to this as the "I never meant to come between you and him" piece of fiction. Okay, so I'll use that first line also as my title. All right, so here we go. I'm going to read the whole thing for you guys. "I never meant to come between you and him," cried her mother. "It's an awful sight to see you in such a state, especially on your wedding day. Please, I'm sorry." Becky could not look at her mother in the eye. She sat at the vanity, trying to calculate whether she should start putting on her makeup or if it was better to wait in case she was going to cry again. They stood there in silence for what seemed like an eternity. Becky was seated while her mother remained standing in the far corner of the room. The bridesmaids had already begun lining up outside the church. The pastor was on the altar patiently waiting. The guests were inside, but not all seated. There was precious little time. Becky knew she had to put on a brave face for her mother. She turned around and said, "I just thought we could put it all aside today and let him walk me down the aisle. It would be good for him, and it would be good for me. I'm sorry too. I know it'll be difficult for you. But just look for my smile at the end of the ceremony, Mom." Okay, so there is my little short story about Becky and her mother. So I'm going to dissect this a little bit. This is a part of the process that I think I've been neglecting a little bit in my past classes that I've been sharing with you guys. So I started off with a random bit of dialogue. "I never meant to come between you and him." And then I decided to continue that dialogue right off the bat because I feel like it didn't quite say enough for me to know where this story was really going. So I, as the author, needed to add some more to really flesh out the picture of what is happening. This is a very important part of the process. If you can picture where this story is going on in your mind, okay, you can start to really write something that is very, very alive, if you will. So I selected the mother continuing that bit of dialogue and saying, "It's an awful sight to see you in such a state, especially on your wedding day." Oh, man. So I started to think about the stresses that come up on one's wedding day. I've only been a part of a few people's wedding days, but I have been present for those moments that are a little stressful. And especially between family members. Wedding days can be very emotional. And I thought it would be interesting to write from a perspective that I don't know a whole lot about, which is the relationship between a mother and a daughter on a wedding day. Must be very, very difficult. I can empathize with that relationship because in some ways, I'm sure some mothers might feel like they're letting go of their little girls and they're going to go off and live their lives with their husbands or their wives. So I thought that it would be interesting to explore the opposite gender and writing two female characters. And I don't know how successful I really was just yet. If I was really concerned about that, I would want to share this piece of writing with other women that I know who perhaps have even been through wedding ceremonies, and get their feedback on how they feel like the female characters are speaking naturally or not, or just to hear their perspective, because they would know a lot more about this relationship than I would. I can imagine, and I have a very strong imagination, as many of you do, but I don't really know what it means to be a mother and a daughter, and in that sort of relationship, especially on a wedding day. So for me, there, right off the bat, I decided to challenge myself. I know a little bit about wedding days, and I know less about being a woman. And so I thought, oh, there we go. I should challenge myself. This is something I would recommend to all of you as well. If you are feeling like you are up for the challenge, I would embrace writing from different kinds of characters that maybe aren't directly a part of your life experience or your lived experiences, and try to write from a very different perspective. I've often thought it would be interesting to write from the perspective of something that is not even a living thing. That might be interesting. Or if it is a living thing, something that is not have language. So what would the story, of a tree growing up next to other trees in a forest be like? Or what would the story of a pig on a farm be like? And you could imagine all sorts of interesting ways to tell stories like that. Those are pretty challenging, though. So I thought I challenged myself, but maybe didn't go too crazy with it. It's something I would also recommend. Then I decided to place this event and this conversation between Becky and her mother, who I left unnamed. I just referred to her as the mother or her mother throughout the story. And sometimes this can be a really, really good, I know myself, I like names and I like naming my characters, but if something doesn't jump out right away, I can often get lost down the rabbit hole of trying to come up with the perfect name for Becky's mother. And so I just, in order to keep myself writing, I just decided to leave it as the mother and Becky, which was the first female name that came to mind. I knew a Becky in high school who was a very, very nice lady. So I decided to place this at the sort of inside the room where a bride is getting ready before she walks down the aisle. I thought that was a particularly dramatic location. And I also thought it would be a good spot where I could place two characters who are having a moment of at least some tension, it feels like. It doesn't quite feel like a crisis, but maybe it does to you. I don't know. I wish I could get your feedback in the moment. So I decided to place this. She sat at the vanity, deciding whether to put on her makeup or not. They stood in silence. Becky was seated. Mother was standing. I also thought that was an interesting dynamic. I use that a lot when I'm directing on stage to show that one person has power over another person. And I thought it was interesting to leave the mother standing and leave Becky seated, even though Becky is about to stand up for herself. It leaves that moment of standing up for herself still. We don't know if she's going to or not at this exact moment in the story. And then I decided to paint the picture because what I have observed on wedding days is, boy, there is just never enough time to visit with everyone you want to visit with and be in the right moments at the right times and all those kinds of things. The clock is always ticking, so to speak, on a wedding day. And there are many, many vendors who are probably hired to help facilitate a wedding. I thought it was interesting to bring in the idea of the bridesmaids already lined up outside the church, the pastor waiting, the guests inside, but perhaps not seated yet. I tried to leave it open so we knew that the ceremony was very, very close to starting. And so whatever Becky is going to have to say to her mother, it's going to have to be probably the final word before the ceremony. And if I were to write this into a longer piece of fiction, I think I would explore Becky's thoughts while she's walking down the aisle with her father that her mother obviously has some issues with. I decided on that little bit of backstory because it's familiar to me. I have a family where my mother and father split up when I was very young, and things were a little tense there for a while. And so I thought it would be interesting to kind of bring in my own personal experience, although with very different types of characters. So I tried to allude to the fact that the mother, Becky's mother, was a bit unhappy with the fact that Becky was letting her father walk her down the aisle. Now, why is Becky's mother unhappy with that? I did not get to explore that yet. So another good thing when you are writing fiction is to leave yourself some open-ended questions or ideas in your story, things that you can answer later. It kind of helps add some suspense to your story and hopefully keep your reader engaged in reading your piece of fiction. Because normally I wouldn't be reading this out loud. Normally when I write so that someone else can read it at some point. And so I try to think a lot about keeping the reader's attention. And just like on stage, you got to keep it interesting, or else your audience is gonna go to sleep. And I feel very similarly about writing. So I tried to bring in this idea of time. There isn't enough time, and whatever Becky is going to say back to her mother, this is probably going to be all we get at this moment. And so that's what led me to this. The descriptions of where we were and all the people that are waiting. And then I came to a very important sentence for me in this piece of fiction. And that sentence is, there was precious little time. I enjoy trying to vary the length of sentences inside a piece of fiction. Sometimes I get on a roll, and I'm kind of a blabbermouth anyway, and I write very long sentences. And it really helps break up the piece of writing if you will take a moment and just very briefly say what it is that you need to say as the story's author. And so that is why at that exact moment I selected a very short, a very brief, a very concise sentence explaining exactly where we were in this moment, that there is not a whole lot of time to have a huge discussion. And then I proceeded. Becky knew that she had to put on a brave face for her mother. So the mother is upset by the fact that Becky is going to let her father walk her down the aisle, as is tradition. But a lot of traditions sometimes, especially in these times, are not chosen to be followed. And perhaps Becky's mother has a very good reason why she doesn't think Becky's father should walk her down the aisle. And that's another thing I would want to explore in further writing this story. But all of that to say, I think I came up with a pretty good last bit of dialogue for Becky to sort of, what I was trying to do with this piece of dialogue is have the character of Becky honor her mother's concerns. And maybe we could put some of the stuff that is tough behind us by letting him do this. So my final word and this kind of all came out in one shot. I didn't have to write a bunch and stop a bunch. The final bit of dialogue is, I just thought we could put it all aside today and let him walk me down the aisle. Now, what are we putting aside? I don't know yet, okay? But obviously there is some tension because of what Becky's mother started off our story by saying. It would be good for him, and it would be good for me. I'm sorry too. So obviously before this story took place, there has been something said between mother and daughter that was tough. And they both are apologizing to each other, which I think is a good thing. A reconciliation at the end of a story is kind of a good way to tie up the knot, or tie up the bow, if you will. I know it'll be difficult for you, but just look for my smile at the end of the ceremony, Mom. And that's my final bit of dialogue. And I thought that this bit of dialogue served well to wrap up my story for the day, because I think it goes towards that reconciliation, and goes towards these two characters are going to have more stuff to work out in the future, certainly. But for right now, Becky needs to get on with her life. And she needs to let her mom know that I'm going to be smiling at the end of this, regardless of the tensions that we just had. And I thought that was, even though this is a difficult conversation to have, and obviously there's some tension between our two main characters, I thought it was a nice way to wrap up our story for the day. So there you go. There's a little bit of insight into how my brain works when I'm writing. By no means is that the only way, or even the right way, because creative writing really does not have a whole lot of rules as far as right and wrongs. So I encourage you all to get a piece of paper and a pen, and this took me about 5 minutes of writing time. I think I thought about it for about 30 seconds before I started writing, and then I wrote for about 5 minutes. And you don't have to be a stickler on the time, but it helps me, kind of just forces me to get to it a little bit. And so I like to put myself on a little bit of a timer. And also I practiced it a lot when I studied creative writing in high school and college. There was a lot of times where we only had a very limited amount of time to do some writing in class. Just kind of like we used to do at 7th Street. So I like putting myself on a little bit of a time crunch because it forces me to do it. And I think that will work well for all of you too. And feel free, if this first line that I started my story off with that I did not write, I never meant to come between you and him. I thought that was an interesting first line, but if you don't, then don't feel like you have to write a short story starting with that line. Go search out your own random dialogue generator and flip through a couple ideas before you land on something that feels good to you. And trust your instincts, okay? If you read a line that you think immediately, oh, I could write something about that, get to work and get writing. Okay, you guys, well, that concludes creative writing, fiction or poetry portion this week. And I will be back on Thursday and Thursdays in the future for a little more personal reflection writing. And we're going to do some journaling tomorrow. So I hope you all will join me, and I hope you all enjoy this video. And it's really, really good to be back in action. Sorry that I was away for so long with technical difficulties and whatnot. But I'm back, and I'll be submitting weekly videos here on YouTube. Hope you all are well. Bye.